2 weeks before I left for college my freshman year, my buddy who was going with me to be my roommate backed out and decided to go somewhere else. I moved into my dorm room, and a new roommate was a guy named Tim from Millbank, South Dakota. Come to find out, Tim's buddy from high school, who was supposed to be his roommate, had also backed out on him a couple weeks before. And now we were both stuck with each other. Tim and I were pretty similar in a lot of ways. We enjoyed the same movies, we liked some of the same music, we were fans of some of the same sports, and our faith, or lack thereof, was pretty similar as well. We had both grown up going to church and youth group and those types of things. In fact, Tim's dad was even a minister. But neither of us had a personal relationship with Jesus. And while we both probably would have identified ourselves as Christians, neither of us were living that way, and we just weren't. We just weren't. And by the end of the first semester, well, let's just say due to a lack of going to classes and not being overly studious and pursuing other things beyond my academic endeavors, I was informed it was probably a good idea that I go somewhere else. So I decided to transfer back closer to home to a Christian college where I could play basketball. And Tim was headed back home as well over the Christmas break. I went back to this college pretty much just to play ball. But there I met a group of guys and a coach who came into my life at just the right time. They accepted me for who I was. They were quick to forgive the mistakes I was making and the faults that I had, but they also showed me a better way and what it meant to live authentically for Jesus. After a few months of being around them, I began to ask questions about the life they were living, and they shared the gospel with me. In April of that freshman year, I surrendered my life to Jesus. One of the first people I wanted to tell about this newfound life was my old roommate, Tim. So I wrote him a letter. I know I'm old. And I sent it to him describing how Jesus had changed my life. Little did I know that a similar letter was on its way to my house at the exact same time. You see, Tim had went back home that Christmas and had a youth pastor that began to pour into his life and led him to Christ. And at almost the exact same time as me, Tim surrendered his life to Jesus as well. What a coincidence, right? I mean, we just happened to be roommates, and I just happened to end up with the group of guys I did, and Tim just happened to end up being contacted by the youth minister he was, and we just happened to give our lives to Jesus on almost the exact same day. Just a coincidence, right? Yeah, I don't think so either. In chapter 2, Ruth goes out to try to find some food for her and Naomi to eat. And the scripture says that Ruth happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was a relative of Elimelech. Ruth just happened to end up in the part of the field where Boaz was. What a coincidence, right? Yeah, I don't think so either. See, Ruth is looking for food for a day, but what she needs is to be redeemed for a lifetime. But you see, in Ruth's day, as a widow, you needed to meet the right person for redemption to happen. The normal practice for women in Ruth's day who were widows was to simply marry the brother of the dead husband. Unfortunately for Ruth, there are no brother-in-laws alive, and she's out of options that she knows of. Then she just happens to end up in the part of the field where a man named Boaz is. Boaz, who happens to be a kinsman redeemer to Ruth. We're going to talk a lot more about that in the next 2 weeks. See, Boaz is related to Elimelech, Ruth's deceased father-in-law, and Boaz is the one who Ruth needed to meet to find the redemption she needed, the kinsman redeemer. You're going to hear that title a lot the next 2 weeks. The kinsman redeemer is actually the central character in the book of Ruth. It's the character on which everything hinges and turns in the story. It's also the central character on which everything hinges and turns in our own stories as well. But more about that next week. So often in life, we think what we need is some sort of daily substance to get us by. If we could just get that homework done today, or that test passed, or that job for this year, or that degree for our efforts, or if we could just win that game, or any number of other things. We want daily food, but what we need is lifetime redemption. Redemption that goes beyond this lifetime, in fact. We need the right person, the kinsman redeemer, to just happen to show up at the right time. It's no coincidence that Ruth just happened to run into Boaz. See, God was orchestrating a story of redemption all the while, and Ruth's story finally interacted at just the right time. Can I tell you, God has been orchestrating a bigger story of redemption around your story as well? There's more going on than just our daily stories with their daily needs. What we need is to run into the right person at the right time. To surrender our wants, our needs, our story to the greater story of redemption that was written through Jesus. I want you to share your story with your group tonight. If you've never heard the story of Jesus, ask someone in your group. Commit to hear someone else's story this week and look for opportunities to share with someone how the true story of Jesus, our kinsman redeemer, intersects with all of our life stories. It just so happens Jesus has been waiting to intersect your story your whole life. What amazing coincidence, right? Yeah, I think it's more than that too.